from my own experience as a coach, longtime coach, knowing the principles of the openings will help you more than learning specific lines. And in fact, learning specific lines will hinder you in terms of just playing well. I don't even mean in terms of future development. I mean like right now. With that in mind, I'm going to go through some examples. So, what's the potential drama? Well, PXM is playing a highfalutin opening here that's part of the aggressive repertoire. And will it help him or hurt him that he studied this opening? It's kind of a good test case, right? All right, let's check it out. E6. Now, bishop e5 is not the end of the world, but knight f3 would be a knights before bishop thing, both in terms of theory and in terms of general principles. Fine. 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 Okay. So now PXM is playing some highfalutin stuff. He's got himself a very interesting position. And this is part of the aggressive repertoire. So in a sense, I should be happy that he did it. And then this could be the game that my naysayers could point to. They'd be like, look, Jesse, the guy did a little bit of opening work. He's got a setup that he's kind of familiar with. He's doing fine. And my argument is normally, well, like if he didn't know it, he would do even better. Okay. So bishop d2, it's a little funky. This is a hard position to play. Well, yeah. So right away, we're going to get into, you're thrown into a position where you need to understand some of the principles of the opening principles and also of this particular setup. So in terms of opening, we need to understand that this pawn eventually wants to move. At the moment, it's not clear how we're going to move him, but we just need to be very sensitive that that pawn wants to move, because if it moves, these two lines will be opened. So bishop d2 can't be horrendous. The move that I very much prefer, though, is playing the queen out here to create a threat and also to say, well, that's our strong side of the board. I'd like to attack it. Okay, mistake. Key mistake from black, because now he's closing the position. My knights will be better, and we just have a straight King's Indian structure where everything has gone our way, and we've gotten rid of the light square bishop. Okay. I guess I like b3 better, but this is fine. Weird. Weird. Now, why is f5 now weird? Especially because the bishop on c8 isn't developed. This is not just that you're hanging the pawn, it's that you're activating the bishop. So again, queen e1, queen g3 would be correct. Now, by the way, PIM or PXM has played GM level moves up to this point. There's no doubt about it. GM level moves. So was it a good thing then that he learned the opening? Would he have done better if he had just followed the principles? Maybe. I feel actually, here's an example with this f5 move that I feel like he's watched maybe the video and gotten himself confused. Because now we're at the kind of the end phase of the opening, and it's time to decide on a plan. And instead of thinking about where the pieces want to go, he does a move that applies in other positions. And I think that's a key trap of learning openings at the under 1,000 / under 1,200 level, is that you're going to go off on adventures based on things that look mildly similar, without thinking like, okay, what's going on with my pieces? So isolated rook is white in this game. Let's take a look. Okay. Okay. Now, here's an amazing thing. At this point, both players are actually following deep theory. All right? It's kind of amazing. It's more than kind of amazing. Now, so so at this point, what we can assume from both players is that both have spent a significant amount of time studying their openings, not just this one. Right? That's my gut on this, just seeing this opening. All right, so b5, good move by black. Bishop d3, knight d7, good move. Okay, now this is one of the most tense positions. I've seen this position before. The fundamental debate for white is, should I castle long or could I castle short? Now, I don't want to go too deep in the weeds, but in general, if he was going to castle short, he should have prevented the queenside expansion of b5 with a4, because he's going to need that space. But if he castles long, then he does not want to play a4. He doesn't want to open up his kimono on the queen side. So in general, if you castle long, you're going to try to mate black. And if you castle short, you're going to try to hold the position, i.e. hold your space advantage. Let's take a look. That was a little too highfalutin. See, already we're talking about highfalutin stuff. That's like 1900, 2000 level talk. Okay, so let's talk about bishop h6. What I want to say is it's incorrect from an openings principled standpoint. Okay, so why? Because we're moving a developed piece twice. Now, there are positions you're going to tell me, Cry, I know I've seen this before. I know this is a real thing. The great rule of thumb about these positions for white and black is bishop h6 is only a good move if you're going to mate the guy. Right? Now, you could still say, Cry, well, what are the default moves in terms of the opening? Rook e1, rook a1. But also, if we imagine that this knight is now poor, which it is, we can consider something like this. It's a difficult position for white to play because white is playing with space. And so one of the things is, let's imagine white, watch some video about how to play this against the Perk. Now we're in a position where he needs to understand what to do, and it isn't easy. It isn't easy. Let's take a look. In general, we don't want to take because black's knight is poor. And by taking the pawn on e5, we liberate that knight. Yeah. And here we can say that black is doing fine because white's traded off his good pieces. This knight's bad. This bishop's bad. So let's take a look. Now, b3, I'm going to guess isolated rook learned this somewhere. This is a very highfalutin response to the Sicilian. However, is it principled? We can say so. Why is it weird? Because eventually you're going to need to use your d pawn, i.e. move it, and in which case you're going to say, oh, I could have developed my bishop in one move. All right, let's look. Okay. All right. Now, interesting. So, we're going to take a look. This is fascinating. There's a variety of things we need to consider here. This bishop feels funky, as in it might get trapped. The knight, as in common in all these Schneider Sicilians, doesn't quite know where to go, but maybe it has this square. White's dreaming of f4, which will only make sense if our rook is developed on f1. Okay. Black could do a variety of things. And let's give that move a chance, knight e2. And I think one of the interesting points about this setup, which relates actually to the aggressive opening repertoire, is that when you have this pawn chain, f4 would make a lot of sense. And the point of f4 from an openings principles standpoint is we would like to develop the rook, right? So when you castle, you can say I'm developing the king. But with f4, you say I'm developing the rook. Knight g3 is controversial because it moves the developed piece twice. Knight f5, controversial because it moves the developed piece twice. Now, so what I want to stress is when you do break the principles, that's when you will find yourself in tactical trouble. So, for example, a lot of people say to themselves, oh, I lost the games because of tactics. Sometimes that's true. But more often, like there was a strategical grief that happened that then created the opportunity for your opponent to create a tactical win. So knight g3 is the first crime. And then it's important to see with the second crime that we're also giving him not only the center, because black can play d5 next, but also we are we're developing the bishop on c8 in one go. Okay, so let's talk basics and let's imagine in this position. I think it's fair to say that on just a raw dogmatic level, white is up one tempo. Is that fair? They've both moved a pawn 3 times, right? So the natural moves according to our principles would be knight d2, knight c3, castles, and if you suspected the rook being on f1, you could think about f4, but really, order of operations, put your castle first, and then, you can disclose f4 to your opponent later. Okay, so is black now winning? It seems so, because a6 is a great move. If now a4, then we trap the bishop completely with d5. So it's a tactical problem that's happened to white because of moving the developed piece several times. So here we go, knight f3. I did a video ages ago on why the exchange French is a great weapon. And let's talk about it from a principle standpoint. I think if you looked at it from a theory standpoint, it's going to be more complicated. So d5, great move. We are asking the e-pawn a question. If he plays e5, which would be the easy system for French, I shouldn't be talking about openings at all, but I'm just going to talk about ideas. You lose a tempo when you play e5, and you are buying some space with that tempo. Okay, so e5 is actually breaking the principles. So ed is a great move if you just want to follow the principles. Now, what's the drawback? Well, now you freed the bishop on c8. However, you are still up a tempo. So we're just playing a tempo game. Knight f3, great. Bishop g4, bishop e2, a little controversial. Not the end of the world, but let's talk about why. Because eventually your rook, probably not eventually, but soon your rook is going to want to come to e1. His rook will want to come to e8. And we will want the bishop out of the way, right? So it's this little bit of foresight. Be like, oh, right, the bishop doesn't belong there. So bishop d3 would be, let's call it the main move. Okay, good. A little funky, but okay. Okay. Okay, good. I like it. c3. I don't dislike that move that much, though I would prefer rook e1 or h3. h3 is not a loss of tempo because he has to decide something for us. He has to do something with his bishop. And if he takes, we can say, well, this is our worst piece because it doesn't have these squares, and so I fix it. But rook e1 would be the most natural move. Okay. Okay. Weird. Okay. So what would be the natural moves in this position? h3, rook e1, knight b3, right? b4 at least doesn't lose a tempo, but now it creates a problem with the c3 pawn, right? This guy's a little weak now. Okay. Okay. Now, one thing I would want to stress about this maneuver knight d4 is that unless you intend to take back with the queen, which would develop the queen, then you're going to lose a tempo when you play knight d4, knight e2. Let's talk about tempi just for a second. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and dude has, let's get that right off there, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So you're up a tempo. After this, you're going to be down a tempo, and your knight will be a little bit funky on e2. So if you wanted to do knight d4, you could say, oh, well, rook e1 first, and then knight d4, and then at least I could take back with a rook and pretend that my rook is great there. Actually, it would be fine, right? Okay, so we lose a tempo. Fine, winning a tempo for time, winning a pawn. Actually, excuse me, it doesn't win a pawn. Why is it a bad move? Because it's not developing, right? So what's the correct move? One of these knights out. I personally like the knight going to c6. Queen b3, okay. By the way, I mean, not only full loss of tempo, but the rook was great on e8. Eventually, you move this knight, and your rook is talking to the e file. Okay, well, let's give it a pass. I would have preferred rook e1. Okay, now this move we can have some sympathy for insofar as it, even though it's developing a piece twice, moving a developed piece twice, it will be talking to the h2 square, so white will have to give us a tempo, like so. Okay, okay. Good move, good move. Nice tactical shot. Doesn't win anything, but it wins you a great square for your knight. And queen c6 was therefore a mistake. Good, good. Okay. Now, this part of the game, we're a little bit past the opening, but your opponent's made a bit of a mess of it as well. And one thing to see about that bishop is not entirely clear where it wants to go. And so I think a good move here would be rook e6, tag the queen, bring the other guy over, tap this guy, and then depending on where the queen goes, we have more flexibility with our bishop. We might go back, for example. Knight ge5 would have made some sense, but okay. So notice what you did there. Okay, you've got a nice position here. And there's kind of like a lot of these positions, there's questions like, well, what should I do? And what you do is, a common fault is to play with your pretty pieces. So knight e6 is playing with your pretty pieces because that guy's already good. And moving him to c5 is not necessarily going to be better. Well, then, obvious question. You can say, well, Jesse, what do you want me to do, boss? What do you want me to do, buddy? So a couple moves. Rook e2 to double makes sense. h3. You could say, Jesse, that's not a developing move. Well, move h3 would make a certain amount of sense because eventually our king is going to need what they call Luft, a little breathing room, right? So that would make some sense.